Hello everybody, my name is Joyanne Haigh and we welcome our viewers and listeners in Barbados and around the world to another edition of Face It and Fix It on CBC TV 8, CBC Barbados Facebook and YouTube, and of course Q100.7 FM radio. Now today we are going to take a closer look at risk, disaster risk reduction. And to talk to us about this more in depth will be Ms. KERRY HINDS, Director of the Department of Emergency Management, DEM, Elizabeth Riley, Executive Director, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, Ms. DANIELLE TOPPIN, Director General, Barbados Red Cross Society, and Ms. ALISON BROME, Program Officer for Coastal Hazards, UNESCO/IOC, Tsunami Unit and Caribbean Tsunami Information Center, CTIC. And later in the program, my very good friend, BRATHWAITE, HR consultant. And as we all know, we're hearing all about the discussions about labor laws as it relates to COVID-19 and the vaccine. And to speak to us a little bit more on that will be BRITTANY later on in the show. Now remember, call us 228-5563 or 228-5562 if you want to send us a WhatsApp message, 228-5562, or log in and watch us on Facebook, CBC Barbados, and you leave your comments there and we will be more than happy to share them with the public. Coming up, members of the DEM, CDEMA, the whole team will be discussing risk reduction when we come back. Back to Face It and Fix It. As I said earlier, we will be talking about risk reduction, and on October 13th, it's actually International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, my apologies. And to speak with us on this is Ms. KERRY HINDS, Ms. DANIELLE TOPPIN, and Ms. ALISON BROME, who is joining us shortly. And also with us is Ms. Elizabeth Riley. Good morning, ladies. Good morning. Oh,
hi, good morning.
Hi. Okay, I'm hearing one of you and not the others. Could you identify yourself, the person who we can actually hear until we get the others on?
Hi, good morning, KERRY.
All right, this is
Hi,
KERRY.
good morning, Liz Riley from CDEMA.
KERRY HINDS, Director, Department of Emergency Management.
Okay, and let's go again. Who else?
Good morning, Liz Riley, Executive Director, CDEMA.
And then that leaves us with DANIELLE TOPPIN.
Hi, DANIELLE TOPPIN, representing the Barbados Red Cross.
Well, welcome, ladies. I think that because of COVID-19, I think people forgot that we're still in the middle of the hurricane season. And we're seeing a lot of bad weather, a lot of freak storms, a lot of flooding. And primarily due, I understand, to climate change and all of the things that are happening around us and around the world. What does this disaster risk management look like? And what does it mean? What does it entail? Kerry, you want to take this
Okay.
first one? Okay.
Sure. Disaster risk management really is the management of risks that may affect us. Now, we have various man-made or natural hazards that can affect us here in Barbados. We are in the hurricane season, and our major risk is usually the hurricane hazard or storm hazard. And with respect to disaster risk management, it is about managing that risk, ensuring that we have the resources, harnessing the resources available to reduce our vulnerability and our susceptibility to the various hazards that may affect us. Now, this requires a whole of society effort, not just the emergency managers here at the Department of Emergency Management, but we have a number of partners. We require the community, we require other emergency response agencies across government. We also require the private sector. And we have cooperation with our international and regional partners to help reduce that risk that may affect Barbados at any time. So today is well, I should say these past couple of days, we have been raising awareness about the International Disaster Risk Reduction Day, which is usually, it is an annual commemoration of disaster risk reduction on October 13th. And this year we are focusing on international cooperation and how that can support us as national level actors in reducing risk, reducing our risk or reducing our susceptibility to various hazards that may affect us.
But Kerry, before we go on, I know people know your name and everybody's familiar with Kerry HINDS, but let's just assume that not everybody, because this show is not only in Barbados, but around the world, because we are on other networks, social media. Exactly, just give us an overview of your agency and its mandate, because I would want that from the others when we introduce them as well. Just give us a quick overview of the DM and its mandate.
The emergency management is the national level agency that is responsible for, has been given the governmental mandate to coordinate management and our response to disasters or emergencies that may affect us here in Barbados. And we coordinate a wide set of actors, including, as I said, public, private sector, community. And our program really is about trying to educate persons about the various hazards that may affect us here in Barbados and implement strategies to cope with or reduce our vulnerability to those hazards. Once there is a particular hazard that may threaten our country or the population, we will mount an emergency response to manage, effect a response really to manage that particular hazard.
Okay, so Ms. Elizabeth Riley, you are Executive Director, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA. How does that differ from the DEM? Similar, but this is the umbrella of the Caribbean?
So good morning, Joyanne, and thank you so much for having CDEMA on the program. So the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, we are a regional level agency. In fact, we are an arm of the Caribbean community and the agency which has been specifically mandated to deal with issues related to disaster management. And as per our mandate, there are essentially 5 things that we do. We are probably best known for the coordination of response and relief to states that have been impacted, but we also play an important role in terms of information sharing, both during emergency times in getting information on what has happened in impacted states to key audiences, and also in non-emergency times, and that's via our website. There's a Caribbean Risk Information System where you can find a lot of information on things related to disaster management right there. We also support our states in reducing the impacts of disasters, and we do that through a lot of partnerships, collaborative mechanisms. That's a critical part of what we do, and very much in keeping with the theme for this year's International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. And in addition, we support our states in maintaining minimum or appropriate levels of capabilities in the area of disaster management, and we do so through training via our regional training center. So the agency has 20 participating states. Dutch St. Martin joined us on September the 1st of this year. And we work very closely with our focal points in those 20 states. And our focal points are the national disaster offices. So in Barbados, our focal point is the Department of Emergency Management, and we work through Ms. HINDS.
Fantastic. And what about you, Danielle? Danielle Toppin, Barbados Red Cross Society. I know doing a lot of work worldwide. It's a worldwide organization. Want to tell us a little bit about the Red Cross Society as it relates to your functions in Barbados?
Okay. Good morning, and again, I'll echo Ms. Riley in thanking you for the opportunity to be here today and to speak. With regard to disaster response, I mean, I think that's one of the places or one of the areas that people are most familiar with seeing the Red Cross movement. In the event of a disaster, globally, you would see the image of the Red Cross responding in many different ways. One of the things that we've been working on is also, preparation. So we've been working closely with the Department of Emergency Management. The Barbados Red Cross has many different areas that we focus on. And one of the main ones is enhancing community resilience. That's one of our strategic goals, to enhance community resilience. And we understand that in doing that, it's not just having an actual approach to how you will respond to a disaster or how you will prepare for a disaster, but there's some of the things that we may not necessarily think of. And these are key areas that we are working with communities to prepare for. So this could be psychosocial support, psychological first aid, making sure that communities are able to, build resilience from within the community. And because Barbados Red Cross's main area of focus is supporting vulnerable communities and vulnerable populations, we understand that one of the key areas that we do this, or one of our key areas that we do this in, is in the area of disaster response and preparedness.
Okay, and I think we have with us Ms. ALISON Broome, Program Officer for Coastal Hazards, UNESCO/IOC, Tsunami Unit as a long title, and Caribbean Tsunami Information Center, CTIC. Ms. Broome, are you there? Well, until we get to Ms. Broome, I want to take us back to Hurricane Elsa and your fears about having a storm in the middle of a pandemic. And I will start with you, Ms. HINDS, because I'm pretty much sure, as a human being first, you were probably very, very, very concerned as to the impact of the storm in the middle of a pandemic, where we are trying to keep people away from each other and then having to open up shelters, etc. You want to talk to us a little bit about that? Take us back to when you heard that we're going to get some of this or a full hit.
Okay, thanks very much, Joanne. What I would say is that previously, with respect to the pandemic, we all knew that this global situation was occurring, and as a result, we would have done pandemic preparedness planning in terms of ensuring that our various plans and procedures were in place, and we amended our various protocols to reflect the eventuality or the complexities of having a pandemic in a hurricane season or with whatever hazard, the interplay with the two hazards. And as such, we updated our protocols, and we would have looked particularly at the shelter management protocol, because there still was a need. We acknowledge that there still would be a need for persons to shelter if they felt that their homes were not in a position to withstand any eventuality that may occur. And as such, we look to modify, one, the numbers that would actually be housed, the number of shelterees that would actually house in the shelters. We put in place certain precautions and protocols, safety management systems. So, for example, the whole question of ensuring that we registered persons were also, the temperature was taken, you had the various sanitization equipment within the shelters. We updated our public awareness materials to ensure that if persons had to go to theirs, they would have their the adequate PPE and masks available. So there were thought went into the process. It was an evolving situation, and it was important that whatever space persons found themselves in, if in the public shelter or even with family or friends, that they would ensure that they would put the necessary safety procedures in place. One of the
Go ahead.
One of the other areas we sought to do, and this was with the assistance of a number of partners, including SEDIMA, we increased the amount of emergency supplies that we had on take into consideration COVID-19. So we increased the stocks or emergency supplies or our PPE equipment for our first responders, as well as ensuring that we had an adequate supply of materials on island to support the population if that situation did occur. We went through various training with our first responders, so they knew to take the necessary precautions. They knew what they needed to do in this new COVID-19 environment. And very important was the whole psychosocial aspect of it as well. Just ensuring that persons knew that they had means, or there was an avenue to turn if they needed whatever support through this entire process. Or within our National Emergency Operations Center, and that is the central nervous, what you would call the central nervous unit or coordinating center for any crisis management or emergency. We ensured that we had the various, we adhered to protocols with respect to COVID-19, and the Ministry of Health was very integral in that process, guiding us on what we needed to do, because there was still a requirement for us to come together as emergency response units, but we still had to ensure that we were guided by the various protocols. We did include as well some virtual aspects in terms of our emergency response, because we knew we had to reduce the numbers of persons who may come together at any one point to coordinate the emergencies.
So let me ask this question so we're clear. The meteorological department, it's separate to the DEM. It falls under, you fall under Home Affairs,
yes,
your ministry, but they fall under agriculture.
Yes.
Strange setup, but when I heard that, I just wanted to clarify, because I was like, that's strange. So when they get the word, something is happening, they communicate it then to the public and to you. You then jump into action, activate all of the different things that you need to activate and agencies. So it really has to come from the meteorological office first, that there's a system. That's nothing to do with you. They do that first, then you're activated. Do you then bring in persons like the Red Cross when I know you work closely together, but then you said you work closely with, I think Elizabeth said that they work with the DEM. So once we know that something is coming, Red Cross reaches out to you, or you reach out to them, and or you wait and see, okay, what the damage is. Do they come in after the fact, the Red Cross, for example?
We would reach out to we would activate the national system, the various stakeholders. So a Ministry of Agriculture, Barbados Water Authority, Ministry of Transport and Works, the housing agencies, the social services. Those persons would come together in a coordination cell, and we would be managing, the department would be coordinating and managing the response. So all of these players would come into play, including the Red Cross, and we are in a position where we seek to effect a response and manage the various reports coming in to the Emergency Operations Center.
And SEDEMA as well, at that time as well?
SEDEMA will be monitoring, and they will give us whatever level of support we require.
Right, okay.
Usually we start with a national level response. If we realize that we require additional assistance, we know that we can call on SEDEMA for that assistance, or any other of our regional or international partners. But we start with mounting that national level response and harnessing and utilizing the resources at the national level first and foremost.
When we speak about, and this is probably for Ms. Riley as well, because I'm going to get back to the Red Cross in a second. Barbadians and people in the Caribbean in general, they hear that a system is coming, they rush into the supermarket, they're not going to buy everything last minute. Your communication leading up to hurricane season and during hurricane season, I can say I hear it constantly. It is on point. You almost ask yourself, what else can you do? Because they still do the same thing. But in terms of being ready, minus the food aspect of things, do you find that we have gotten better as Barbadians and West Indians and people in the Caribbean? Have we seen an improvement to readiness as it relates to hurricane season? SEDEMA, regionally, I'll ask you.
Yeah, thank you, Joyanne. And it's a great question. And I think the true answer to that is that we have very different experiences depending on the territory that you're looking at. And what we have found is that in territories where there have been very recent experiences with hazard events, and I don't want to constrain the discussion just to talking about hurricanes, because as you know, we are a region which is very prone to a full range of hazards, as we have seen very clearly in 2021 with, volcanic eruption. We've had an earthquake, we've had floods, we've had cyclones, severe weather events, you name it, and we've really had it. And on top of that, against a backdrop of a pandemic. So when we're talking about readiness and preparedness, you really have diverse experiences. I think one of the critical things in really increasing levels of preparedness is trying to send a message which is one that touches persons at a personal level. And we have been working quite a bit with our countries on how we do the better crafting of messages. How do we send out those notifications to persons in country that there is a potential threat and the actions that they can take to get ready? But the other component of it, I think, is a social side, because sometimes, and we found this through our studies, we may make assumptions with respect to the extent of the readiness actions that persons are able to undertake. So when we give guidance, for example, through the Department of Emergency Management, that ahead of a system, you want to stock up on a minimum of 3 days of food supplies, water supplies, etc., etc. I think we also make the assumption that persons have the capacity and the resources to do that. And that is not always the case. So more and more, we are looking now at how we sort of revisit our own preparedness actions and the guidance that we give to our participating states, and how the social systems and the social safety nets in country can assist in those preparedness actions as well, particularly for persons who are not in a position to do so.
Break here, but when we come back, I certainly want to touch on things about being prepared, because I'm not quite sure if it's about being prepared or what is more important, preparation, because we need to prepare, but how much can we prepare for storms that we're not sure as to how strong they will be, versus the recovery. And are we prepared to recover, and do we have things in place to recover quickly? We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. We are speaking with the ladies in charge, and all ladies in charge of the disaster management programs, various ones. And I wanted to speak to Danielle Toppin. We also have, I believe, Alison Broom on the line, and we're going to get to her in a second. And I'm not sure if you can answer this question, but any of you. Before Elsa, we would hear the utilities companies coming on, and everybody's saying, yes, we are prepared, we are ready. And I'm thinking to myself, can you realistically tell people that you are, or you have done everything humanly possible to protect your equipment, I should say? Because the state of readiness is more to do with how fast can you recover, more so than the actual preparation. In other words, the two go hand in hand. So if you're telling Barbadians or people in the Caribbean, let's take Lights in Power, which I will discuss later on in the show in another segment, when they come and they say, okay, we are ready, but you're hearing that the storm is a category 1, do we realistically know what we can handle? Because isn't that making people feel a sense of false hope? Because something comes and knocks down, let's say, all the poles. You didn't expect that. So I don't know if anybody can answer that question when people say we are prepared. Are we prepared? Because it's really more about not just the preparation, but are we in a position to recover quickly? Isn't that where it really should be about, what it should be about? I don't know if Red Cross wants to take this first, and then we will get back to the others, seeing that we haven't heard from you as much.
I'm not fully sure if I understand the question.
Okay, the Red Cross, you come in after the storm. People need help.
Right.
You need to be prepared to help people to respond. So I'm saying, well, we're hearing agencies coming and telling Barbadians, okay, we can lock down, we can hammer up and put tape on the glass windows, and as much as we can, because we can't fight Mother Nature. We really can't. We're not only talking about storms, talking about tsunamis, earthquakes. There's only so much we can do. How ready are we for the recovery aspect when these things hit? That's why I said Red Cross would be a good person to ask, because you come in after the storm, after the tsunami, after the earthquake, after the ash fall.
Right. You made a good point earlier. Preparedness and response go hand in hand. Your ability to recover effectively is really going to be based, and this is not just in this context, that's just life, you know. What you have in place beforehand is going to strengthen your ability to recover. But one of the good points that was made earlier is that, you know, a lot of the times we make assumptions about people's ability to prepare effectively so that they can respond and recover effectively. And when there's so many increasing demands on communities, on households, there's so many challenges that we've never faced before. Many families' ability to prepare is compromised, and as such, that limits the ability to recover. So this is what we talk about when we speak about resilience, because your level of resilience is really about your ability to respond and recover from any challenge, whatever you may face. So I would definitely say that preparedness and response, preparedness and recovery go hand in hand.
Alison Broom on the line. Unfortunately, she can't join us other than being on the phone right now. Alison, are you there?
Good day. Good morning, Joanne.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
We can barely hear you.
Okay, I'm trying to speak up as best as I can. Can you hear me better now?
A little bit better, yes.
Okay.
You have a very scary title, one that out of all the disasters, I mean, we don't like any of them, hurricanes, ashfall, volcano eruptions, your earthquakes. But the reason I don't live on the beach or by the beach, apart from the fact that I can't afford it, I worry about tsunamis. And you obviously know a little bit more about that more than others. Your role, tell us a little bit about it in the agency.
Thank you, Joanne, and good morning to the rest of the panel, and good morning to Barbados as well. Thank you for the opportunity. At the UNESCO IOC Caribbean Tsunami Information Center, which is based in Barbados, our role is primarily to mitigate the impacts of tsunamis and other coastal hazards in the Caribbean and adjacent regions. And as you indicated on the previous question, one of our primary focus areas is that measure of preparedness and building that capacity for resilience as it relates to tsunamis and other coastal hazards. In this regard, I would also want to have a little take at your previous question in terms of, are we really ready and what does it mean? And I will share with the panel and Barbados a bit on our Tsunami Ready program, which is a program that has been conceptualized through the U.S. adaptation of the U.S. Storm Ready program, but we have piloted here in the Caribbean. And it is now being piloted further and, I should say, adapted across the world under the leadership of UNESCO IOC. So what does it mean to be tsunami ready? As you said, we focus on mitigation, preparedness, response, building that capacity at either the national level or the community level, working with our partners internationally, regionally, as well as at the community level to look at tsunami inundation maps, developing those evacuation maps. Where should people go in the event that a tsunami has occurred and is likely to threaten that particular location? Having drills, preparedness, having signage, equipment so that the national and community authorities can effectively communicate and advise the population. And of course, it all is part of the capacity building, and we actually get the population involved as well. So, of course, being tsunami ready does not mean that tsunamis will not occur. As you said, we cannot and have no control over our Mother Nature, but it can help to mitigate. And the studies have shown that being tsunami ready and being prepared can help to mitigate the impacts of those tsunamis, because in the Caribbean, over the last 500 years, we've been impacted by just about 75 tsunamis that we have on record, and these have caused significant death and destruction. So really it is about enhancing the capacity of persons to save their own lives and also protect their livelihoods.
So let me ask you, for those of us who don't know, and I certainly don't, so when there's a tsunami alert, let's just say, God forbid, let me knock on some wood that Barbados had to experience that. How would that happen? It would be from we heard about a volcano eruption, we heard about an earthquake, and then we hear certain countries are on a tsunami alert. If we had to have one, God forbid, would it be on a specific site of the island? For example, it could be on the south, and if it's on the south, it wouldn't happen on the west or the north. How does that actually work?
Thank you for your question. And of course, many persons, I believe, in the public realm would also want to have this type of information. Based on our input from the scientists, let me just say that tsunamis can occur by a variety of sources. We can have seismic sources, which would be our earthquake, as well as volcanic eruption. We can also have landslides and, of course, meteoric events and so on that can actually help to generate tsunamis. And in the Caribbean, we are all prone to these sources. In addition, we can be impacted by tsunamis traveling across ocean basins, so across the Atlantic as well. And in terms of your actual question as it relates to whether certain sections can be impacted or not impacted, this generally depends on the size of the landmass that we're dealing with. It also depends on the nature of the source, etc., and also the bathymetry, the type of coastal shoreline that you have, and so on, the physical features. So there are a range of parameters that actually help to decide or determine what is the
where it would come from,
whether it's localized or not. But what
can I before you go on, can I ask you a question that is a burning one? Would you know where before it actually happens, and what timeline roughly would we be looking at, or does it depend on what caused it, as you listed out various things?
Okay, there are a number of parameters, again, that go into actually our monitoring and analysis to determine whether we can forecast tsunamis and their particular impact times, etc. Our regional tsunami service provider, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, they are connected, and there's a global connectivity of networks that actually combine that seismic and sea level data to determine if a tsunami has occurred. And there is a system where there is some initial information given to national authorities as to whether there has been earthquake that has the capacity to impact countries by way of a tsunami, but it just essentially, that tsunami information statement essentially just gives information as to an earthquake has occurred, and really it's of a particular threshold over 6.5 in magnitude, and of course at particular depths of the earth. And then from there we go on in stages. So if there is, based on analysis and additional information that comes in from sea level gauges, modeling, forecasting, and so on, then that information is actually provided further to national authorities. So there's a stage process. Invariably, the rule of thumb, or what we try to aim for, is to provide this at least initial information to national authorities within minutes. But of course, to get the more detailed information, additional analysis is required, and this does take a bit of time. But we have, through our Tsunami Ready program, and I would also like to reference the recently completed Tsunami Ready project that was supported by the European Commission and implemented in Sherman's, St. Lucie de Mullet, St. Peter, where we actually went through a number of these parameters. We also refined the national protocols and developed the community protocols that will help national authorities and community authorities to actually provide alerts to the community in an effective way.
Someone has sent us a message, and I was actually going to ask this question, and I'm glad that they did too. How do you alert people? If the information, it takes minutes, and I'm on the beach having a good little time, this person is asking, is there church bells or a horn located on every beach, so people will know? Because I know the ads say that if you see the water receding, and maybe it's time to just pack up and get out of there. How would we know if the time is so short?
Thanks for that question, Ms. Haigh, and I will also deflect a bit to the national director, Ms. HINDS, to actually answer in her capacity as the national director. But I would also just like to heighten that the program and our efforts in relation to tsunami risk reduction are really focused on two elements, which is personal preparedness and personal awareness, because we recognize it takes minutes, and therefore we do have to enforce that early detection and the natural warning signs of tsunami, so that should people be able to recognize these, they can take effective action. And of course, we have also built the capacity at the national and the community level to address that measure of warning and dissemination internally if necessary.
All right, another questions are coming in, and a question here, if you can put it back up on the screen. Good morning. Are there going to be any more of this evacuation practice sessions like they had before? KERRY, we had evacuation practice sessions for various things like tsunamis, etc. The person is asking if we're going to have some more of those sessions.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question. Just to answer the previous question in terms of what are the warning signs. We do teach persons in our awareness program, as Ms. Broome would have indicated, the natural warning signs in terms of the receding of the water. If you see that, you move to higher ground. We also have in place our common alerting protocol system, where if there is a warning or information statement about the possibility or the potential for a tsunami, we utilize what we call our CAP system, or Common Alerting Protocol System, where the Met Office would transmit this information depending on the time frame straight to our radio stations, and that in order to disseminate the message in mass to the population. And that also goes to our first responders, so we know what we need to do in terms of going into the communities and warning persons to mobilize and move to higher ground. Now, there are proposals really to look at a siren system, and we have interacted with the NCC and stuff to raise awareness among the lifeguards, because we have lifeguards on some of our beaches and some of our more populous beaches. And we have started a program where we look to raise awareness among those body of persons, so that they can, in essence, warn the population that are on the beaches. But that is hand in hand with the whole program, the whole thrust about persons ensuring that they are aware of the natural warning sign. So it is a work in progress where we seek to utilize various low as well as high technology systems really to warn the population about any impending threat of a tsunami.
I was going to ask you the CAP. The CAP.
Our CAP, that is that is hooked up. You can sign up via your various smartphones, and that where you receive messages directly to your phones. We use it even in hurricane time, where we send messages where you would see the Met offices sending messages on alert messages. Over the weekend, we would have had a number of them with respect to like flash flooding and what's not. So we utilize that platform to send the messages in mass. That platform is also hooked up to the various 4 of our radio stations, and we are looking to expand that as well, so that if you are listening, for example, listening to the radio you could also receive those messages. So there
Oh, that's
are
it. Yeah.
various, yeah. So there are various modes of trying to warn the population, along with that public awareness and that education in terms of teaching persons the natural warning sign. Because invariably, we want you to help your neighbor. It will take time for the message to get there. So the more you know about the potential of the hazard or how it may affect you if it occurs, it is important that you know that information so you can act accordingly. Our program at the national level is a very pervasive program where we go into various communities, businesses, schools, to educate persons about the hazard that may affect them and some of the coping mechanism or strategies they can put in place to deal with these hazards. There may be plans and procedures, what you will do if you needed to evacuate. So yes, we have had a number of drills, and are we are going to be continuing that program um, to assist persons in improving their knowledge of what they need to do and improving their knowledge in terms of the response, what they should do. If you take a look at the Sherman, St. Lucie to the Mullins Bay, St. Peter area, you would last year, along with our partners from SEDIMA and CTIC, we had a program where we mounted an education program to the various residents and the schools and businesses in that particular area, because we were seeking our first recognition, our tsunami ready recognition, which is a global recognition. If you go into that area, in the Spikestown area, in the Six Mills area, you will see a number of information signs um, telling persons about what they need to do in terms of the natural warning signs, what they need to do if in the eventuality of a tsunami threat. We also have on those signs, you will see the maps showing you a map of the area where you are and the various, and you will see scattered throughout those communities evacuation signs. So you know, okay, if you are going to move to higher ground, the possible routes that you can take. And then we also have assembly points. And we did all of this in conjunction with our partners and utilizing the science, our partners at Coastal Zone Management Unit and our international partners through the European project and the CTIC project. So we got an idea of what would be the hazard zone and then what potentially may be the safe zones in that area. So there are plans to expand that program and to take it to various communities. And within that program too it is the opportunity to have the various drills. We would have had some over the years in various communities, in the Old Town community, in the St. John communities as well, the coastal community, really to raise awareness about the hazard and what you can do and the routes that you can take if you need to make your way away from any hazard zones into a safe zone.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break, but when we come back, we have some questions for the Red Cross and about meals. And I wanted to also mention, to my concern, is that a lot of the emergency services are actually located on the coast, west coast, south coast, and that's a little scary when you have to think about it when you think about a tsunami. But we'll be back after the break. back to Face It and Fix It. Our guests this morning, we are talking about disaster management, disaster risk reduction, as we mark the day on October 13th, I think it is. Yes, I am correct, October 13th. But before we get into that, we had a question for the Red Cross, and this is for Ms. Danielle Toppin, the director. People are asking about the Meals on Wheels. Do you still have that program?
Sorry. Yes, we do. The Meals on Wheels program is still running. We're one of our main things that we're thankful for is it was able to continue even during all of the lockdowns. So if anyone is interested in it, the best way to do it, you can either come through the welfare office, or you can make a call directly to the office.
So these meals are meals that would go to the various agencies like the Homeless Society, or this is individual deliveries?
So they go to individual persons, and it's usually most of our clients, elderly persons, shut-ins. Those, we have some homes that they go to.
Talk to Ms. Riley quickly before we go back, because I want to get to Sedima. It's four of you, so we're trying to get everybody in as best as we possibly can. Ms. Riley, your connection with the rest of the world and the agencies, the connection of your agency, what other agencies are you connected to in terms of getting information? Is it just only the Caribbean, or we hear of things coming out of Florida and information coming out of the various countries? What other agencies are you connected with?
Yeah, thanks, Joanne. And I do have to leave at 11 for another engagement, so thanks for the opportunity again. So the theme of this year's IDDR is really about international cooperation and how the international community provides assistance to developing countries in supporting their disaster risk management programs. And Sedima is, I would say, the bridge between many of the national disaster offices and the international community. And we're happy to play that role. What we find is that a lot of international partners have a preference, actually, to provide support to the region on a regional level basis. And they will approach Sedima and with a view to developing programs or projects that can support the individual states. So we work with a diversity of partners regionally across the globe. There are the multilateral agencies like UNESCO, which is the parent organization for Ms. Broom's organization, the Caribbean Tsunami Information Center. We have partnerships with the International Federation of the Red Cross, which is, of course, Danielle Toppin works with. We also work with specialized agencies across the globe. We have affiliations through some of our partner agencies with, for example, the US Geological Survey, and they provide support through our Seismic Research Center and collaborate with them on technology transfer. So there's a whole diversity of, I would say, resources out there to support the CARICOM states and the Sedima participating states. And part of our job is to facilitate those connections, understanding where the areas of need exist within our participating states and where to access any support that's required from our international partners. We also do quite a bit of work with respect to resource mobilization through the aid agencies of a range of our partners, and these include, and I don't want to omit any, but some of the major ones that we work with are, for example, the European Commission, the UK through the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, Global Affairs Canada, USAID, and that's the government of the United States, but also entities like JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency. In fact, we have a technical expert that's been dispatched to the Caribbean who's hosted right here at SEDIMA. This is the second time that we've had a technical expert from the Japan International Cooperation Agency with us, and he's going to work with us on strengthening the work of our regional training center, including expanding our training courses. So there's a lot of opportunity for our participating states to benefit from these partnerships that we have set up. And the United Nations, as I mentioned, is a very critical one. I just wanted to highlight one that you would have seen just last year in support of and this year also, in fact, in support of the response to COVID-19 and in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where we work very closely with the World Food Program to collaboratively set up the Integrated Regional Logistics Hub out of Barbados, of course, with the support of the government of Barbados and financial support from the government of Canada. So there are many partnerships which are operating behind the scenes to make sure that we can provide the type of support to the people of the Caribbean during their times of greatest need.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much, Miss Elizabeth Riley, because I know you have to leave us, leave the other women to be interviewed. And that was Executive Director, Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDIMA. Thank you so much for joining us, and I don't want you to be late for your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So my next question is to Miss KERRY HINDS, and I understand, okay, we know that October 13th marks the day for International Day of Disaster Risk Reduction. How is the DEM planning to mark the day?
Well, thanks for the question. We have mounted, we know of the various restrictions that we have in terms of going out in the communities and such, because we are in a COVID-19 environment. What we have increased our capacity as it relates to social media. So we are pushing a number of messages across our various social media platforms and encouraging our partners across government to do the same. We've enlisted the support of the Government Information Service as well to push the messages, and of course the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation to assist us in really raising that awareness about disaster risk reduction and the day. So it was very important for us to have this program, this opportunity to be on the program today, really to increase that awareness about the International Disaster Risk Reduction Day. And what we are doing here in Barbados, along with our various partners like the Red Cross, CTIC and SEDIMA, what we are doing to really reduce the risk of hazards and emergencies that may affect our various communities. In the past, we would have had a number of workshops as well, or maybe go into a community and mount a program. But this time we've been doing it in a virtual setting, hoping that we can reach not only persons here in Barbados, in the various communities, but also across the globe.
Okay. I want to ask the same question to Miss Alison Broome, because KERRY, I want to get back to you for final words. But Miss Alison Broome, could you tell us how is your organization going to mark the day? Is it similar to the DEM?
Say yes, it is. Given the pandemic, we are generally having web-based activities, mounted social media activities, and I would also want to say that the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction is really giving impetus to our World Tsunami Awareness Day, which comes up on November 5th. So I hope this is another opportunity that we can join CBC national players as well as all persons join in globally to really promote our World Tsunami Awareness Day as well, where we seek to, again, raise that awareness and build that capacity for our populations and our countries. But essentially, we will be providing many videos and basic stories and themes as it relates to the international cooperation for tsunami risk management. And I would also, you did ask a question earlier in terms of whether there'll be any more drills and any more activities that would occur. And these are the type of activities COVID permitting, and persons can even just practice their family plan at home through their mind, walk it through and so on. But as we move on and move out of our pandemic situation, hopefully we are looking through our UN Ocean Decade to really have at least 100% of our at-risk communities tsunami ready by 2030. And this is really a very transformative step that UNESCO IOC has stepped out and recognized the impact that we can have globally as it relates to preparing our populations. And therefore, we encourage the international community, our technical partners, our national players and stakeholders and partners, as well as community level, to really join us and get on board as we seek to make the globe tsunami ready.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Danielle Toppin, the Director General of the Barbados Red Cross Society, how is your organization going to mark the day?
We'll be using some of the same methods. So, I mean, most of our appeal will be internal. So it's really reaching out to our volunteers, making sure that our own volunteers, because our volunteers are really our feet on the ground. Whenever we enter a community, it's with the assistance of our volunteer base. So always ensuring that they get the necessary information, that anytime they go out into the communities, they're able to inform people effectively. We generally share information that the DEM posts on our websites also. And there are some messages that would be developed by the International Federation of the Red Cross that we would also be sharing on our social media pages. But first and foremost, most of our activity will be working with our own volunteers.
Okay.
It won't happen on the actual day, but we're going to be doing a tabletop simulation just to enhance our organizational capacity so that we are best able to respond.
Well, let me ask you this. If one wants to be a volunteer for the Red Cross, what do you have to do? I want you to tell us that. How do you volunteer?
I hope that suggests that you're thinking of doing so.
Well, I will, you know, I'll be honest with you. If I couldn't grow an extra toe, because I think I've used all 10 fingers and toes, I can certainly, but there are a lot of people out there who are unemployed and may want something to do useful. And I think now is a good opportunity to tell us, how can we be a part of the Red Cross?
Okay, so I'll just jump in one bit there and say that, you know, people generally think that volunteering requires a lot of time, so that you have to have a lot of disposable time to volunteer. I would say not just the Red Cross, organizations like DEM as well, through the DEOs, we require all different types of volunteers. So if you have 1 hour a week to update a website, you can do volunteerism in that way. So just saying that, not to push you, but to also encourage people to think beyond.
Well, you just sold me, because truthfully, no, seriously. If you're saying that even just an hour of your time to help in a way that you can, whatever little talent you can bring to the Red Cross, well, then I put in my hand up before the 13th.
Okay, well, I'll look for your application.
No problem.
So you can visit our website, it's barbadosredcross.com. There's a volunteer form there that you can fill out virtually, or you can come into the office and you can just fill out a form. And it's as simple as that. Someone will make contact with you. You'll have to go through an interview process. There's the code of conduct that all of our volunteers have to sign. You will learn about the fundamental principles of the Red Cross. And then wherever activities are happening, we start to integrate you into the activities.
I know a few people watching me right now, and a few friends. I'm volunteering you as well. I'm looking right into the camera to those of you watching the show that I personally know we're going to help the Red Cross. So I want to
Great.
thank you as well for coming on the show. And that was Danielle Toppin, Director General of Barbados Red Cross Society. Thank you so much, Danielle, for joining us. And I want to give the final word to Miss KERRY HINDS, because KERRY, and forgive me for calling you KERRY, because we hear you so regular. We feel as if we know you. Here's what I would like to ask you, giving you some final words. Everything that we've just discussed, I feel you really need to come back and come back and come back and separate them into tsunamis, earthquake, hurricane, ashfall. Because everything requires a different response, different types of preparations for X, Y, and Z, a different kind of cleanup. So like what to do, because there's some things I heard today that I wasn't, I didn't even know. And some questions that people have, it was good questions too, because if I'm on the beach and a tsunami, we have an alert and I'm enjoying myself, people may want to know what are these signs. So even if you don't get the alert, the signs of the ocean receding and, you run. And then I drive, honestly, KERRY, I'm not going to tell you a lie. It's not to panic people. I'm on the South Coast and I'm enjoying and I'm looking like driving, I'm seeing the water looking so pretty and I'm like, and then all of a sudden the thought goes, oh dear, if we had, while I'm driving, where do I turn off? And I'm thinking, you know what, don't turn. The ad says run. Remember there was an ad out, I think it was Red Plastic Bag, he did an ad about tsunami.
Yeah.
Yes, and he talked about all the different things, if you feel this, if you see this. The only thing you can realistically do is to get as far away from the ocean as possible. But I said all that to tell you, I really need you to come back to this show as often as possible. So my last question would be, when do we end the hurricane season? How is it looking? What letter are we to, and are we close to Z as yet? And your final words after that.
Well, in terms of the hurricane season, traditionally, the Atlantic hurricane season, it closes on November 30th. But that is not to say that we cannot have systems out of season. And as you well know, last year, it was a pretty horrific season that we had. We are in what is traditionally the most active part of the hurricane season, the September, October, and November months. And the Atlantic is still a hive of activity. So it is important that persons are aware of this. They monitor the areas, monitor the Barbados Met Services, the Department of Emergency Management, ensure that you have your plans and procedures in place, and really ensure that your family and your loved ones know what they need to do if something does occur. Today's program really underscored, and the discussion today really underscored the fact that the Department of Emergency Management, along with the various partners, we mount a very comprehensive program which looks at a myriad of hazards. It also underscores the fact that it is not the Department of Emergency Management that can do it alone. We require the support and the investment of a myriad of actors across the national space within our communities, like our community volunteers. So I encourage persons to join the district emergency organizations. We have 30 across Barbados, and they are our eyes and ears in the community, and those are our first responders in the community. We also have within this comprehensive program, we also need and have the assistance of our various public sector ministries and departments and various agencies. And we also look to the private sector as well, and various international and regional agencies support the efforts. Disaster risk management is all of our business, and we need to ensure that we invest and we recognize that we all have a part to play in reducing our vulnerabilities to hazards and increasing our resilience. not only as an individual, not only as a community, but as a country. It is really important that we improve that resilience. It is only then, heed the calls, try to be as prepared as possible, prepared to respond in eventuality. It is very important that we know we cannot necessarily prevent a hazard from occurring, but we can impact or already ensure that we are prepared to deal with one and to respond as quickly and as comprehensively as possible, and really look to recover as quickly as possible so that we can go back to business as usual. It really is important that I underscore the need for that resilience.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, and that also ties into another discussion that we will be having later on in some other shows on climate change. That was Ms. KERRY HINDS, Director, Department of Emergency Management. When we come back, Brittany Brathwaite, HR Consultant. We'll be back. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. Before I actually introduce my next guest, my good friend, I just want to mention something that it's on my mind, and I wanted to mention it earlier on, but I'll take a minute now to mention it. We've all seen the news about and read the news about the Barbados Light and Power and their request for a rate increase. And me personally, I am hopeful, like most Barbadians, that they do not get the rate increase at this time. I'm hoping that it is something that can be looked at, of course, but at another date. And the reason I say that, I read the responses from the Barbados Light and Power and about their need to invest in solar renewable energy and other things that they said that I'm sure that in other shows we will discuss. But let me just say this. Some of the biggest way, and I say this coming from a person who used to work at one of the utility companies, you need to conserve as much as you possibly can. Utility companies are not like Pepsi and Coke. They don't tell you to use more and drink more. They actually tell you to use less. That is their job, is to teach you how to conserve. And I am pleading with the Barbados Light and Power, if they can incline their hearts to a level of humanity and look at the bigger picture, that a rate increase at this time will bury Barbadians in the way that we cannot handle, because it is not about our light bills only. It is about increases right across the board, from your food to your clothing to everything that we do. We cannot handle anymore. And I wanted to use this opportunity to raise my voice and to lend my voice. And I'm hopeful that those who have to make those decisions also remember that they too are customers and they too will be impacted by the rate increase. And we're going to use some other shows. Nathan is going to come on, our friend Nathan Hart, and other people, and teach us, hopefully share some information about how to use less energy, how to reduce your bill. Companies and Light and Power, you should be doing some energy audits. Help people to reduce their bill. If you can do that, then your production to bring us electricity will be lower. Similarly for the Barbados Water Authority. Both agencies operate in the same way regarding their resources. So I am hopeful that you lend your voice to Barbadians and you speak up about this rate increase, which we understand they may need, but the timing is really, really off because we cannot take any more financial burdens. And on that note, it is my pleasure to introduce my very good friend who I'm sure shares the same sentiment that I just shared with you, Brittany Brathwaite, HR consultant. Brittany.
Good morning, Joyanne.
Good morning. Sorry?
Goodness. I love your hair.
Oh, Peter Allen made me try something new. And I know she's probably wondering what she's talking about. But anyway, that's our producer. Good morning, Peter Allen. But Brittany, I am glad to have you on. We've spoken many times. I've had you on another show on Brass Tacks. I come to you whenever I have issues or people have issues about HR. Today is no different. We are having some issues on the ground as it relates to COVID and employment. We have seen in the news of one or two companies mandating a vaccine. We're asking, do they have rights? Can they fire them? What is the deal? So let's start with a simple question. Can employers mandate a vaccine and fire you if you cannot, if you refuse?
Well, currently there is no national mandate, there's no legislative mandate for vaccinations. And I think we start there. That's the basis upon which any discussion around vaccine mandate should start. Notwithstanding that, or the absence of that national mandate, there is of course the recognition that businesses around the world in the region have identified the vaccine as a catalyst to getting beyond COVID-19. That being said, we are seeing, not just in our region, but across the world, the galvanizing of different industries, private sector, different sectors, manufacturing, tourism, etc., getting together and saying, well, if our industry is ever going to recover, we can no longer, in the absence of a national mandate, sit and allow this to be perpetuated. Therefore, we are going to say, like has been argued in the past, that based on this pandemic, really raising hell around our industry, that the vaccination and or frequent testing is going to be a prerequisite for operating safely in this industry. And not just from an occupational safety and health perspective, but also from the perspective of ensuring that we in fact attract the consumers that we need, regardless of the goods and services that we're offering. So I think this is a really complex issue. I've heard a lot of emotion around it. I think it needs to be clearly said that there is no national vaccine mandate, but in the absence of that national vaccine mandate and recognizing that vaccines are in fact a way forward, then all parties need to plot a path for recovery for everyone.
But here's the thing that I worry about. Again, I'm vaccinated. I encourage people to vaccinate, but of course, it's not forcing anybody. It's still their choice. And I do agree that you should have a choice. But people who refuse to vaccinate, and I don't mean for medical reasons or religious reasons, I mean people who just figure, look, not me.
Right.
They're calling it discrimination. I find that hard to describe it as that. Because discrimination, we grew up with, we heard, okay, you're not supposed to discriminate color of the skin, things that don't generally hurt you. Because, you can't stop somebody from getting a job because they're Indian, black, white, fat, or whatever. So, because that can't hurt you. That can't make you sick, obviously. But when you're talking about possibly transmitting a virus in a workplace that requires you to work with the elderly, the vulnerable, customers, people, because that's how the virus spreads. How do you call that discrimination. How do you see it like that?
Well, I think, and we can't put our logic on other persons or force persons to see through the eyes of either you or I. And therefore, that's where the law becomes imperative. So lots of persons are grounding that interpretation around discrimination in the Discrimination Employment Prevention Act, which exists in Barbados. And in that act, to avoid a prerequisite or a test or an action not to be deemed discriminatory, an employer would have to prove that to execute that test falls within the ambit of a genuine occupational requirement. So it would have to be proven that to undertake this test really satisfies the genuine occupational requirement or satisfies the definition of a genuine occupational requirement under the Act. And that persons do in fact need to have this vaccine or a test to safely execute their job. And I think this is where we are maybe losing the persons whom we most need to go get vaccinated, because it's moved away from a public health crisis and discussion in many sense into a legal discussion. And sometimes and many times, while what the law is saying is legal, it's not always right. It's not always the way in which we are going to ride out what is facing us as a people. So I think we really need to get back on the table that we are in fact in a public health crisis, and balance what is being put on the table, both employers and employees, with good old common sense. What can get us through what is now, our norm, this pandemic, and this pandemic that is seemingly not going away. It's going to be knowing your status, so being frequently tested so you're aware of whether you're carrying the disease or not. And, where you can be vaccinated so that, as proven, it is less transmissible based on what I'm reading, because I'm not a medical practitioner, but also that you have a significant chance of recovery. Even when we look at our statistics here locally, and we look at the deaths, the number of deaths of persons who have been fully vaccinated versus those who are not unvaccinated. The numbers worldwide of recoveries of persons who are fully vaccinated versus those who are unvaccinated. It isn't hard to start to understand why an employer would say, well, if these statistics are saying that 90 to 95% of vaccinated persons are recovering faster, that means less time out of the organization, less downtime for productivity, and even more safety for you and your family, then why wouldn't I want that to be a mandate?
Well, here's another thing too about the vaccine and let's say a health certificate. Now, there are a lot of jobs that require you to have a health certificate. Now, what I would like to find out is what is on that health certificate. What is the checklist? Is it herpes? Is it hepatitis? Because those are things that can spread. So we may have to look at also that. I mean, I'm being smart, but it's really truly a smart way of getting it done. Because if you're going to do it to the children, and you can mandate it for children as you have for other vaccines on your green card as a stipulation to get into the requirement to get into school, there's really nothing stopping government, Ministry of Health, for adding the vaccine, or do you have COVID, or those onto the list of requirements in a health certificate when you're serving people. That's another way of getting another section of people to take the vaccine. Well, not to take the vaccine, but to say, look, you already have to go and get a check. Most people, as far as I know, you're dealing with food, you set up a restaurant, they ask you for your health certificates. You go on crop over, you go to a temporary stall, you go and get your health certificate. Why should you work in a stall at crop over or any establishment and not know your status? That can then impact other people. You see, the problem I have is not forcing anybody to take a vaccine. The problem is, I always say, do no harm. Whatever you do, whatever choice you make, even if it's not to take the vaccine. Do no harm. So if that means, it means you gotta wear 2 masks because you're not vaccinated, if that means you have to choose a job away from members of society, if it means that you can't go to dinner or go to a concert, but then you have to understand that these are the things that you're going to lose. That cannot be discrimination. That's about people protecting themselves. So I'm saying you have a right, yes, you have a right not to vaccinate. But what about the employer's right? What about the other workers? Don't they have rights too? And I know it's a ticklish subject. It's like a Mexican standoff. Everybody pointing at, it really is. But I want to get back to, something I have to ask. These are questions that were coming in because I told people you were coming. I have a question from a viewer. She was in quarantine, and she was on vacation. And it took a couple of days before she can get back the second test and then the results. So she was out for 7 days, and she was on vacation. How is that treated in the labor laws? Are you, who's going to, it's your vacation. Do you suspend the vacation, call that sick leave, and then after the quarantine, then you continue your vacation? And similar question is, if you're COVID positive during your vacation, which means it's a sick certificate, do they then suspend the vacation? Your sick leave now kicks in. Then once you have a clear certificate of health, then can you continue your holiday?
Well, there's really no treatment expressly in the labor laws to the suspension of holiday and the certified sick leave overriding that. It really will come down to what your contract and the company policy or how the custom practice has treated to this in the past. So there are some companies, if a person falls ill during their vacation, it doesn't suspend the vacation because the vacation would have been pre-approved, you've already been paid for the vacation, and that time out is already being spent. Whereas some companies do in fact offer the suspension of the vacation, particularly where there's a certified sick leave certificate that's provided by a medical practitioner. So I would say that that person would have to refer to how the company treats to that specific scenario. And also because certified sick leave in some companies is not a paid leave period at all. Some persons are simply paid through the national insurance scheme, whereas some employers will top up what you're paid from the national insurance scheme. So there are really two areas which would have to be assessed here. How does your employer treat to certified sick leave when you're on vacation generally, and then whether there is a difference in the way that those leave periods are paid, and whether you will be harmed more if you go on certified sick leave. So you may want to allow the vacation to continue, and harm, I mean, via the payment, because you may probably not receive the national insurance check until after the certified period is over. Whereas your employer will either top up immediately or pay you in full immediately. So I would say to that person, in the first instance, check with whomever is the representative that can offer guidance on that, whether it's your office manager or whoever, and then also discern what your leave payments are like, whether you are paid in full for your certified sick leave, and whether you would prefer for that period to override the vacation, if that is in fact allowable at your organization if you're in the private sector, and if not, ask your representative how the period is handled.
So what about, so there's no payment for, let's say a person is working every day, he's being paid $100 a day, he's a laborer, and he's getting his weekly wage, he gets his phone call, partner, you name on, I was in contact with you, I positive. He then gets a phone call that he has to stay home. Now, and he responds, obviously he'd vex because he was like, my big man, I can't believe you tell me these things, that type of whatever. And then all of a sudden he home, he can't get the money. Yeah. Now, here is where the problem lies with something like this, because I understand this is what's happening in our country. Like some people, they're not telling the truth about who they've been in contact with. Reason being, the same scenario where they said, big man, listen, don't call my name, yeah. I know it about you. I hear you got COVID, but I got my children, and I go to work every day, and I get $100 a day. If I miss out on work, I ain't getting paid. Then his name is not called because his friends got him back. So you understand where the situation now, because there's nothing for them. They don't want to lose their money. They got their family to feed. Obviously, we don't want them to spread COVID if they are positive. But then they're like, well, you know what? I don't feel I got it. But they don't know. But they opt not to. They're asking people, don't call our names, you know? Yeah, so something like that. I was wondering what your thoughts are. I mean, should we suspend weekly, and should we just give people wages? Should we ask the NIS to take care of these things? Seeing that we've seen the numbers are so many, it's like it's a lot. How do we not encourage people to, oh, I could stay home and get money, because you don't want that to happen as a result of making an offer like that. But how do we encourage people to be tested and stay home and don't worry about if they're not getting paid or not?
Sorry, Joyanne, I think we may have lost my visual. I have some.
We'll repeat that in a second. We have a long WhatsApp here that let me read for you. It was on the screen just now. Good morning, Joyanne. One of the other issues in the workplace that employees are having major challenges with is the testing when the business is impacted by a positive COVID-19 case. Some businesses ask persons to be laid off for the week, month, no pay for the quarantine period, to get a sick leave certificate when they go to get tested and quarantined, but you are not ill. So no doctor will issue such. These businesses are trying to control their payroll by putting at a disadvantage persons who are paid weekly. Don't know if you want to respond to that, because again, businesses have a role to do, a job to do. They're in the business of making money. So they're not dishing out money if you have all of your sick days gone. Brittany, are you still there with us?
Still here with you, and I heard your first question. I've also seen the
okay.
question.
Can you see on the screen? Okay, I'll let you respond.
Yeah, the electricity has gone out, so I'm hotspotting. But I would say, first and foremost, when this pandemic reared its head last year, the Prime Minister made some recommendations to employers around extending, where possible, COVID leave. And what that would mean would be to offer to an employee who may have to be tested or may have to go into quarantine or isolation, a time, at least a minimum of 6 days paid. What I would say, though, Joyanne, is we have to recognize that this is not the first, it's not the second, it's not the third cycle of surge in cases that companies have faced. So in many, and we have, as you can appreciate from a person who's well-read, such as yourself, small and medium enterprises make up the majority of enterprises in the country. And what that means is we are not dealing with a lot of enterprises who in fact qualify under a large corporation categorization. And therefore, a lot of these small and medium enterprises have or would have started this pandemic by incentivizing people to go get tested, to isolate safely, etc. during the first 2 or 3 or 4 lockdowns. We are now, under, I can't remember, maybe it's our 6th or 7th set of restrictions. And in many cases, businesses are struggling just to make payroll. So I would balance what is being said here to say that at least the businesses I've been interacting with genuinely have to make the tough decision whether they are going to continue to pay those who are at work, replace labor and pay those persons. And unfortunately, those persons who may have to go get tested because they don't qualify either for certified sick leave through the NIS, or they don't qualify under the company's regulations, may have to go unpaid for that period of time. So it's a really, really complex situation, and it continues to be more complex. And I'm sorry to take this back here, when we have the percentage as high as we do in the country with who are not vaccinated. because the more we have persons who are unvaccinated, the less protection exists, and the more we have to have people coming out of work and isolating for lengthy periods of time. So the trickle down, this trickle down really never stops, and it really won't stop unless we have those vaccination numbers up. So it isn't quite illegal. It isn't illegal if an employer has not in fact embedded in their contract of employment that they will pay for time off, which is not categorized as certified sick leave. If they're not paying for that time off, and that's not in your contract of employment, there is nothing illegal around that. But I totally understand your perspective, Joyanne, that it doesn't incentivize people to be honest. I think the difficulty that many are facing here is that incentive would have been tried 3 and 4 times, and businesses really are at the precipice of either let's close because we literally can't afford this, or let's replace this labor and keep going so that we can at least make payroll this week. And I think that's the complexity of the issue at this point. But to the blanket question by the viewer, it is not in fact illegal not to pay you for the time off if you have not qualified either under your contract of employment or if you have not qualified for the benefit through NIS. It's not illegal for the employer not to pay you for the certified sick leave time off. There are employers who extend uncertified sick leave days. Those are days which do not have to be certified by a medical practitioner. And if you have those days but you've already exhausted them, then the only option would be to take unpaid leave for a testing period or an isolation period.
Now, I've heard the union, the head of the General Secretary, Ms. Toni Moore, she came out and asked persons to, band together and to resist this notion about, people having to be forced, mandated to take a vaccine. But she also mentioned about the health and safety measures that most of these companies have not put in place over the years. But, then she said all of a sudden they want this safety measure put in place. Now, yes, both equally important, and we certainly want for health and safety, which I believe takes a back burner and should be on the front burner on every business in this country. But here's where my question is heading. If I'm working with you, Brittany, and you have COVID, and you're not vaccinated, and I go on to the HR manager, and I said, listen, you are supposed to keep me safe. I'm working for you. But you let Brittany come in here, not vaccinated. You see how the story could then turn. Because if we're saying that companies are supposed to make sure that their employees are safe, under the Health and Safety Act, in the environment, everything, even the chair you sit down in, make sure it's comfortable, it's safe. What's stopping me from going to to the boss and saying, but I don't understand you, sir. You let Brittany come in here without a vaccine, and now we got COVID. We vaccinated, but you allowed for Brittany to come. You did not mandate it. You didn't do anything other than she wore a mask, and Brittany and I work close in the kitchen, and there's one lunchroom, and of course, people have to pull down the mask. How is that handled under the Health and Safety Act? Sorry to put you there, hon.
And this is where I think we have to decide that we are going to be comprehensive in the way that we treat to health and safety, and not have certain lens or certain ways to treat to specific things. So I appreciate what the leader of the union, the Barbados Workers Union, may have made mention to, and where there are some challenges with employers enforcing some elements of occupational safety and health. But regardless of that, this is in fact a safety and health challenge. This is in fact something that needs to be tackled from a safety and health perspective. The more we make it about the refusal of persons' rights versus not, and not really focus on what it is, which is a safety and health and public health crisis, then you lose your captive audience. And I'll give you an example. Over the weekend, I've been tracking all of the press statements made by the various umbrella bodies. And in my capacity of human resources, as the president of the Human Resources Management Association of Barbados, I also made commentary on how productivity has been impacted by isolation numbers, etc. But I noticed that the Barbados Hotel Tourism Association issued a press release yesterday, and in this press release, they made mention of the workers' representatives, the government, the social partnership a number of years ago, collectively coming together and saying, well, hepatitis is a transmissible disease. And in conjunction with other diseases, we really need persons in housekeeping and specific areas to have this vaccination or to be tested against hepatitis, so that we are sure that when they're dealing with linen, etc., that guests as well as them are protected. And that was agreed. It was absolutely agreed. I think the one differing thing here is, of course, that the hepatitis vaccination or whatever persons are inoculated with may have pre-existed, and then we did not have the hesitancy that we're seeing right now. But we have mandates for, as you made mention to, food handler certificates, general health certificates for functioning in manufacturing factories, etc., as prerequisites. If we ignore that, this is exactly that. This is not about taking away people's rights. This is about protecting their health. The more we focus on that, and the less we focus on the other thing, I think we can hold the captive audience. And I think it's been a really hard lesson for us as a people to learn, Joyanne. When I look at our numbers 2 months ago, the number of deaths, and the fact that the number of deaths have doubled in less than 6 weeks, it really breaks my heart. Because when we look at the number of deaths of unvaccinated versus vaccinated persons, then there's no way that we can isolate these discussions that we're having in the workplace, at home, in the rum shop, wherever we're having these discussions. It circumvents taking the thing that is available to us to prevent deaths, to prevent people getting ill, and to prevent transmissibility. And it really does come back down to the vaccination and focusing on the public health element of that, and not taking away people's rights.
Well, I know, and I'm not going to call his last name, but I'm hoping that he's watching. I have a good friend by the name of Ryan, and he who has this view, which is we have to live with it. It's something that we have to live with, and people do die, yes. And I think the argument that people are saying, oh, but you can still catch it, and we all get that. No one said that you will not catch COVID after you take a vaccine. What they said, the science shows it minimizes the risk of being hospitalized and even dying.
Yes.
But just because someone who's vaccinated dies and happens to have COVID, it could also mean that their system was so overwhelmed with the comorbidities that COVID was the last straw. But the numbers show, the science is there. Numbers don't lie, that half the world, or more than half now, they've gone in this direction. And I'm trying to figure out, and I know everybody thinks different. We have to explain things in a different way. But let me just bring it back to just the job. If you were just looking at work and related things and being able to make money.
Right.
When you are working at a hotel, in this case we talked with the hoteliers, etc., you mentioned, and the people who come to the hotel from overseas, the tourists, don't come and cancel the bookings because they want to be in an environment that they want to feel a little bit safer, but you can't blame them. So then people decide, well, I'm not vaccinating, and then you lose your job, or you're saying, well, you can't fire me, but the hotel can shut down because the owner now has no money. You are now out of a job.
I'm so glad that you have raised this in a realistic perspective. And this is not just the hospitality industry. We have employers across industries who have been battling with this pandemic for over 2 years. And if we're going to be realistic, there's there is only so much that even some employers will invest personal money. I think we've seen a number of businesses already close their doors. A number of them, they've closed their doors. So I don't think it's beyond our imagination. I really don't think it's beyond our imagination to say employers will close their doors if they simply cannot attract people to consume their business. But when we look, we can't help but look at an industry like tourism. Tourism employs over 16,000 people, and then we're talking about entertainment and all of all the trickle down persons who are impacted. Last year, when the tourism sector collapsed because of this, we as a people, we recognize the serious impact it had on our unemployment rates, people's ability to simply live and provide for their families. And I'm not sure how it is lost on us that we could get back in that position. We really, really could if we do not attract persons to this country. So, I was made aware that TripAdvisor, which is one of the biggest review sites in the world for persons choosing destinations, they introduced a couple weeks ago the ability for hotels, villas, any type of accommodation offering to list the percentage of their vaccinated staff. And they did that because people who are choosing vacations are selecting destinations. So let's go back there. We are talking about hotels. They are selecting destinations
Wow.
based on vaccination rates. So when we went and this, it has a trickle down effect to our entertainers. Who are entertainers going to entertain? They can't entertain a people who are not working and don't have disposable income. So the Barbadian audience, there's only a limit to that Barbadian audience if our unemployment numbers are low. If we can attract, for an investment because persons are scared, because the productivity numbers are low, because we have this constant cycle of testing and isolating and testing and isolating, then we are literally a meeting of the minds that is required. I think we saw both the private sector association as well as the BHT and a number of other umbrella associations coming out over the weekend to say it's time to get back to the table and discuss whether, at least in some industries, vaccinations must become mandatory if our economy is going to see some semblance of recovery. And just drawing to your reference before I go off, we have countries of our size, Antigua's one, Grenada's one, who are moving ahead with these things because they recognize if they do this for another couple of months, there's no recovery for people.
Okay. Well, Brittany, I want to thank you so much. And again, we want to have you come back on the show and again, because we know that you have so much to offer and knowledge in this subject. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. I want to remind our viewers and listeners that this Thursday we will have the Barbados Association of Retired Persons on Thursday, and we certainly look forward to that. I do, because I need to get my BARC card. This message here says, good morning, I am a resident of Boscobel. This is the 11th day of October, and we have not had a drop of water from our pipe since the latter part of September. This is definitely not fine at all. Hardly any water trucks come. When they come, it's after curfew. Barbados Water Authority, please, people are appealing to you in the parish of St. Peter, in the area of Boscobel. I mean, on today's front page, you know, we have $86 million WA boost, and we keep hearing of the plans, and I think they're great plans, but the interim measures people are asking about is what matters right now, not only just the long-term plans. And before we wrap up again, I want to get back to the Barbados Light and Power discussion. I went to my personal page, I aired my concerns. I am very, very, very concerned. I'm very upset, really, because I'm working and I am barely making ends meet. So God knows, you know, what's happening to other people who are not working. There are people who did not have a job before COVID. There are people who lost their jobs during COVID. Obviously, the people who didn't have a job before COVID, clearly not getting ones now. People with families, fathers trying to pay child support, mothers trying to buy Pampers and milk. And I am going to use my last minute or two pleading with the Barbados Light and Power and the powers that be, that whatever you do, however you choose to resolve this issue, that you resolve it in a way that does not directly impact the people of this country. You said you have 130,000 customers, and I am just one voice. But I can tell you, if those rates go up, and I do not have to be an economist, or nor am I'm not an economist, but applied sense will prevail here, that it is not about your light bill only that will be going up. It will be everything in this country, and we cannot take more. I would like to suggest, with the 1 minute that I have left, Light and Power, you kind of start a massive conservation campaign, energy conservation campaign. You need to reward us if we can get to lower our light bills within such a period. And similarly, Barbados Water Authority, same thing too. Educate people how to change the bulbs, what to do. There are people right now that are at home, online teaching, online learning, electricity gone up already. People are at home because they're not working, watching movies, video games, opening up the fridge all the time. People go work from home, Zoom. Their electricity bill is going up already because of this pandemic. Couldn't you at least wait until we are in the clear and maybe make this request? And I know I've read, and I don't want to mention all the other things I've read about your reasons, but I'm saying to you, dogs don't pay the light bill, cats, the birds, the bees, human beings do. Incline your hearts to a level of humanity and help us. My name is Joyanne Haigh. This has been Face It and Fix It. We'll see you on Thursday. Until then, God bless. Take care.